Hello and welcome to a Tuesday night edition of Blind Eye Live. I am your host, Blind Eye himself, Hunter King, and man, I was going to do two shows today. I talked about it yesterday, and I don't know, doing two shows a day just kind of seemed like a bit much. So I am going to try and condense my draft preview stuff in the show in the second half. First half, we're going to talk about some NBA playoff thoughts. And I probably should have put in the title as well, although I'm wary because if the title gets a little too long, I can't post it apparently. There is some interesting stuff going on with the wide receiver position and some of the young receivers, star receivers who are up for contracts this year or going into the last year of their rookie deals. These guys from the 2019 class, Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, D.K. Metcalf, because there is some drama with... Uh-oh. I don't know why my stuff isn't showing up over here. Once again, sorry, I've got to... I gotta check my audio because for some reason sometimes my levels don't want to show up. Okay, there it is. So it is showing up there. Sorry for the dead air. Okay. I'm having this weird issue now that I'm using this mic. It's showing up on I've got a level showing up on my audio input device, but not on my mic. So that's just weirdness, but I'll deal with that later now that I know that audio's fine. So we got some stuff going on with these 2019 second and day two receivers who are up for contracts. And actually, I want to say Deontay Johnson was also 2019 draft. So he's up for a contract too. I mean, I would say it's inevitable he's going to get less money than those other four guys. But anybody who is waiting to see what the market looks like is stupid. You need to be the first team to sign a guy. Because at that point, everyone else is going to see it and they're going to act accordingly. You want to have the cheapest deal, you need to be the first one in the door. So Deebo a couple weeks ago, and I think I might have talked about this on the show, took the team off of his social media. And that stuff kind of annoys me, but because I'm like, really? Like, what are you doing? But I do understand it once you think about what the teams are doing. The teams, their people in front offices and coaching staffs absolutely have media connections, absolutely talk to these media guys who never name them. They never name their sources, but they're constantly getting information from scouts and front office executive, assistant coaches, general managers, team presidents, because they'll put titles, they won't put the teams or anything. Sometimes they'll even put which conference they're from. But they talk, and they float out ideas because Deebo, AJ, I believe DK and Terry McLaurin all are skipping the voluntary off-season workout portion, which just started, which is voluntary. It's not mandatory. It is voluntary. Baker Mayfield has skipped that, and people are criticizing him. Oh, he's supposed to be some good leader, and they're telling this to people who support Baker. Loyalty is a two-way street. Respect is a two-way street. They just backstab the crap out of him. Now, I don't care what anybody says about Deshaun Watson being better. The Browns had told Baker different going into this process. Because they came out and claimed that they told him that they were going after Deshaun Watson. They had not. Among other things. But this guy, no other Browns quarterback has been able to do for like over 25 years. And that is win you a playoff game. Get you to the playoffs and win you a playoff game. Did that in 2020. One season later, whatever, you know. And I'm not saying he's perfect, but people just, I love how people demand loyalty from the best players, but then they don't want to be loyal to the guys that they don't want. That's fickle. That's fickle. You don't want to be fickle. And the same goes with these players. The reason they're, and because A.J. Brown has joined Deebo Samuel, I think it was yesterday, he took the Titans out of his social media stuff. He's doing that because so far through this process, there's been talks of like, the Jets have been trying to trade for everyone to get a number one receiver. So once it came out that Seattle had reportedly turned down the number 10 pick for DK Metcalf, which it's been kind of iffy on whether that was actually a true offer or not. Whether the Jets actually offered it or the Seahawks said, you know, we wouldn't even take, it's like you need to give us more than the number 10 pick, and New York stepped back. I don't know. But there have been multiple different reports of how that went down. Then allegedly, you know, they've been calling about everybody. They've apparently contacted the Titans about A.J. Brown. And there were some fans on social media, or this was going on, and A.J. Brown had made a tweet, it has to be mutual, or I think he might have been replying to some report about him, about the Jets having interest in him, or he was just putting a post out responding to it without, you know, tagging anything. It's like, it has to be mutual, and it isn't. Or actually, I can pull it up right here and read it verbatim, because it should be in my mentions pretty high here. Yeah, so I'm going to read the exchange. If it's not mutual, I don't want it. Someone responds, the Jets want you, I promise. Someone else responded, he doesn't. And A.J. Brown liked that response. A.J. Brown wants to be a Titan. He doesn't want to go anywhere. He's not interested in going anywhere. But apparently, Titans aren't willing to give him what he's due. Because, and I don't understand this, the franchise has been looking for a number one receiver my entire time watching the team. I started watching the team at 6 years old in 1999, the year we lost to the Rams in the Super Bowl. One of the reasons Ryan Tannehill has been so successful as a Titan is because of A.J. Brown. Because A.J. Brown started taking a bigger role in the offense his rookie year, around the same time Tannehill started or took over the starting job. Like, his numbers his rookie year were awesome. He was better in year 2. And year 3, when he was healthy, well, last year when he was healthy, he was really effective. He's one of the most effective receivers in the NFL. You've got to re-sign this guy. Look, we just saw Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams get traded for first and second round. Well, Adams for a first and second. Hill, who's a few years younger, a first, I think it was like a first, a second, a third, and 2 fifths. Like, it was a ridiculous haul of picks. and then get Adams got $28.5 million a year on his extension. Hill got $30 million per year on his extension because they were both. Hill was going into the last year of his contract, and Adams had just been franchise tagged. Brown's younger than those guys, and physically speaking, he's bigger and stronger than Hill. And I'd argue I'd say he's better and more dangerous after the catch than Devontae Adams, and that's saying something. But he's younger than those guys. DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, they're all younger than those guys. So Deebo's gotten into some crazy waters here because, his brother's been posting some stuff on Facebook, the last post of which being like, he won't be a Niner, that's for sure. Because he's had a bunch of posts. That was kind of the last one. I think it might have been in response to someone. I saw it reposted on Twitter from, I think it was JPA Football. It's interesting because, there are other reports that Deebo wants out of San Fran. He's done, or that he's extremely upset with how he's been treated in negotiations. And I think the Niners are saying, look, our scheme is doing a lot of the work for you. You're not. And they might be saying, you're not as good as these other guys. We don't care what the estimates, and this is another thing with a lot of the stuff on social media and media outlets, they're posting their estimated contract values. And I guarantee you this stuff is being used by the teams. By the players. And the teams are like, some randos are estimating your value out in the world. We know what our scheme does, and we have this. We believe we're, enhancing your scheme. We're enhancing you with our scheme. I still don't buy it. I think Samuel's one of the best overall weapons in the NFL. But if I was looking at these, say, let's throw in Deontay Johnson, these 5 receivers, if I'm ranking them and their impact and their overall all-around skill, and as much value as Samuel brings as a gadget guy on runs, I don't think he's the best of these guys. I personally, and some of this might be a little homerism for me as a Titans fan, but I've looked at the numbers. I've watched the games. Brown can do just about anything Deebo can do, and as a receiver, he does it all better. Just period. And he's number 1 for me. The tough part is parsing between Deebo, DK, and McLaurin. Because I would say out of the 3, as a receiver, like running route stuff, I would say McLaurin and even Johnson are better at that. But Samuel is super dynamic, and McLaurin's really good after the catch too, but Deebo's so dynamic with the ball in his hands after the catch. He's obviously better than all those other guys at gadget stuff. DK is so physically dominant down the field. Okay, that wasn't news. DK Metcalf is so dominant down the field and so physically... He's so physically gifted. His skill set's limited, but he dominates within his skill set. And there's something about his ability on... he's a monster in 50-50 situations. But A.J. Brown's really great at that. He's awesome in those situations. So it depends on what you value. I'd still say Samuel, because of everything, is probably number 2. But I think that's more of an argument than him being better than A.J. Brown, personally. If I'm ranking these guys, it would absolutely be Brown, Samuel, DK, McLaurin, and then Deontay Johnson. But all these guys are really freaking good. And all of these guys are going to get more than $20 million a year on their next contract, I would imagine. Even Deontay. And if he doesn't, I would honestly be shocked. Maybe they could get him down to $18 million, but a year. But the other guys are definitely going over 20. They're going to have to go over 20. I don't even see how Deontay Johnson, because of Christian Kirk, getting the deal he got, which is at minimum a 4-year, $72 million deal. That's $18 million a year. That can max out at $84 million, which is $21 million a year. Yeah. I don't see how. I honestly don't. I don't see how Brown and those guys don't end up in the Hopkins, Adams, Hill range or even higher. The issue is the first guy to sign is probably going to end up being or with the least amount of money, and some of those guys might be hedging on that. I think some of those guys are probably saying like, "Look, we're not going to sign right now unless you give us this," because these other guys, it's really complex. But the teams are going out. They're sending out their feelers. They have their media people that will share. And it's not that it's everyone that's doing this, because I know Paul Kaharski, who's on Outkick 360, has his own platform. He's covered the Titans for years. I remember him. I think he was with ESPN for like 9 years, and then abruptly was gone. They replaced him for stupid reasons. Because I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have gone out on his own willingly. Because, I think from what I understand, he really liked that gig. Who wouldn't? But I got all my information, for the most part, from Kaharski and Jim Wyatt of the Tennessean. Well, Kaharski was on Outkick 360. He said, in response to one of the other guys on the show saying, media calling A.J. Brown a diva. And he goes, well, and Kaharski really quickly goes, well, I haven't called him a diva. I haven't heard anyone from the Titans call him a diva. And that's because maybe no one's told that to Kaharski, but Brown's in the room. And what probably happened is the team's like, look, Matt just said don't be a diva, or, one of the reasons we like you is because you're not a diva. You're not usually a diva. I'm speculating here, so don't take this as gospel. But it's very possible they said, look, or they used the term diva in the meetings, and he took that as, okay, they're going to portray me to the media as a diva. Well, I'm gonna get out in front of it. And I see some people like, these players don't be taking stuff to social media. Look, the teams have been taking stuff to the media for decades as sources. This is only fair. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. But unfortunately, in today's society, public perception is what matters. The court of public opinion is what matters. That's why everybody goes to civil court for allegations. That's why a lot of people don't go to the criminal court if they don't really have great claims in a lot of these different things we've been seeing, like, say, Deshaun Watson. It's about life ruination. It's about life ruination. It's using social media and public perception to blackmail someone into doing what you want them to do, or giving you what they want. I'm using Deshaun Watson. I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening. I'm using it as an example. That's a battle that's being fought in the court of public opinion to get Watson to do what they want. Now, whether you believe that's right or wrong, that's up to you. But that's what's happening. That's what's going on with these receivers. I want the Titans to just give A.J. Brown the money. Get the contract done, doesn't matter. Somehow we have the most expensive offense in the league right now. Don't know how that happened. I might have talked about that on the show last night. I can't remember because I saw it yesterday. But we just need to get this A.J. Brown thing done. And the 49ers, if they really have poisoned that relationship with Debo so bad that he wants out, that's bad. Green Bay maybe ought to think about seeing what it would cost to get Debo. Because here's the other thing in all this. So part of trade value is the money attached. If you trade for Debo Samuel, he's going to go from like a couple $1 million cap hit to like 25-30 million in cap hit. That's a huge jump. Devontae Adams is on his franchise tag when the Raiders dealt for him. And that was like 21 million. And he got bumped up to 28.5 million a year on the AAV of the contract. Tyreek Hill bumped from like, I want to say he was like, his deal was like a 4-year, $40-something million deal. I want to say in the last year. He was somewhere in the teens. So like his contract, I think like doubled basically. Like the jump for Debo and all these guys on their contracts is going to be massive. So part of the reason some of this is hard is figuring out the cap situation involved. And at this point, the one thing is the teams do kind of have the leverage, especially with the new CBA, the way it's set up, and as little as these guys are making on this rookie deal, or on their rookie deals, I could see for the teams like just waiting it out and then slapping a franchise tag on them next year. Like, you know, they kind of, in that way, they do have a lot of leverage. So the players are now trying to use public perception. They're trying to use social media to get the fans to put pressure on the team. Which, to be honest, I'm totally for. Because I want A.J. Brown to stay a Titan. I think this is really dumb. I think the Titans just need to figure it out. They've just got they have to. They have to figure this out. With that being said, we're going to move on to the NBA playoffs. So, my Grizzlies didn't get off to the best start. Lost game 1. I believe they are playing right now. But just from like the first weekend of games, of course, the play-in was crazy. Of course, the Lakers got eliminated, which was so great. Or wait, the Lakers didn't even make it to the play-in, right? They got eliminated before the play-in. That's right. They didn't even make the play-in. The Timberwolves won the 7-8 game, which was not a shock to me. And then beat my Grizzlies in game 1, although they shot the lights out, while the Grizzlies shot kind of, or worse than they usually do. Like, Anthony Edwards went just bonkers in that game. And some other guys for them did really well. I really think the Grizzlies are going to right the ship there. But the Pelicans won out the rest of the games and became the 8th seed, which was pretty nutty, to say the least. But I mean, they're not gonna stand up to the Suns. The Warriors right now, through 2 games against the Nuggets, they've been bringing Steph Curry off the bench, and they've been starting Jordan Poole. I'm kind of waiting for some sports writer trying for clickbait to write a story about how, or asking the question, are the Warriors better with Steph Curry coming off the bench, or should the Warriors continue to just bring Steph Curry off the bench? One, Steph Curry elevates whoever's on the floor with him. So, I mean, having him on the floor with bench players is a plus for your team. Jordan Poole's been awesome, though. And I actually think it's kind of interesting that he wasn't one of the 3 players for most improved this year. I think it's incredible that John Morant is one of the finals for most improved because he was already so good. But he did make such an incredible leap this year. I've seen a lot of people like Zach Lowe voted for, or his number 1 guy was Desmond Bane. The other 2 finalists other than Ja were Garland and Murray, and I can't remember if they've announced that award yet. I really don't know who to pick out of those because most improved is so interesting because there's different tiers of, or different types of players who can win that award. 6th man of the year is just obvious. It's Tyler Hero. But getting back to the Warriors, they've dominated the Nuggets through 2 games. Jokic has struggled, and there's already people saying, see, this is why Jokic isn't the MVP or shouldn't be MVP. My counter to that is, Jokic has been to the conference finals before. Embiid has never made a finals. Embiid hasn't been any more successful in the postseason than Jokic. And everybody's willing to make all the excuses about his supporting cast to benefit him, but aren't willing to look at the fact that the Nuggets have been without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. the entire year. They're without those guys right now. Like, it's arguable that the 3rd best player on the floor for them every night right now is a late 1st round rookie, Bones Highland. Because I'd argue he's been more impactful of late than Aaron Gordon or Monty Morris or anyone else on the roster not named Will Barton. Obviously, and Jokic. But yeah, Jokic has struggled through the first 2 games. I mean, for me, the MVP award came down to Giannis and Jokic, not Embiid. Although he's close. I mean, he wouldn't be an undeserving MVP award winner. I just believe it's very clearly Jokic this year again. And if it's not him, the clear other, like the clear guy who should win it if Jokic does it, to me is Giannis. But I guess people have Giannis fatigue still, or whatever. And if I was going to say who the best player in the league is, not who was the most valuable over the season, if I was picking a player to build my team around right now, I'm picking Giannis. Period. But Jokic's struggles are because of how freaking good the Warriors are. And they have a lineup right now. They have the new lineup of death for them. And I'm just going to use their stats from a really tiny 2-game, this is not real, but it's real, sample size. With this lineup on the court over the 2 games against the Nuggets, on a per 100 possession basis, they are scoring 200 points per 100 possessions, which is nuts. And they're only allowing like 75 points with this 5-man group on the court. And I'm going to name that 5-man group for you now. Steph Curry, Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and Draymond Green. Through 2 games, if you were, obviously this lineup hasn't had, isn't averaging like 100 possessions together a game. So, they're not scoring 200 points a game. But over 100 possessions at the rate they're scoring at. They're scoring 200 points per 100. That's literally, I mean, that's ridiculous. That's basically like you took 100 layups and made all 100. I mean, well, that is exactly what it is. And then on top of that, the defense is holding to like 75. Because Wiggins is a great defender now. Green is one of the best defenders in NBA history, period. He might be on the NBA defensive Mount Rushmore at this point. Curry and Thompson, like Curry's always been a plus defender, especially off the ball. But he's been good on the ball. He creates turnovers, and he doesn't take ridiculous chances. Is he the best defender? No. But in certain contexts, he's one of the best defenders in the league. This team is great at rotating and helping and just always being in the right spots, playing on a string. Thompson's always been great at this. He's been a really sound number one wing defender for most of his career. Now he doesn't have to do that because they got Wiggins. And Poole has really improved defensively. But that 5-man lineup, that's nuts what they're doing. Now, that's not sustainable. A lineup would not do that over the course of an entire season with the minutes that they're getting together. However, this Warriors team is legit. Like, these guys, like Clay's looks healthy now. Draymond looks like he's getting healthy right now. Curry's looked fine. And they've had guys who have played pretty big roles for them at different points. Jonathan Kuminga only played 5 minutes last night. Juan Toscano-Anderson only played 5 minutes, or was it last night or in the last game? I think it was last night. Warriors are legit. The Warriors are freaking legit. It's also interesting that a team that had the Splash Brothers have found a third scorching hot scorer shooter whose last name is a bottle of water. Is a body of water. Extremely fitting. Moving on, the Celtics right now, the Celtics are up on the Nets in their series right now. Although Kyrie looked great. And I'll say this, I'm all for the fan versus player trash talk. I love how Irving's not asking for fans to be kicked out of the arena because he's not a pansy and a coward like LeBron James and Russell Westbrook are. He's not, and people can say whatever they want. He's not a fragile person, and he basically said as much in the post-game press conference. He said, if that's how things are, yeah, I'm gonna talk back, and I'd rather that. Have people go back and forth. That's part of what makes sports awesome. It's a battle. It's conflict. This isn't tennis. This isn't golf. And there's a reason more people watch these sports than watch tennis or golf. Because the crowd doesn't have to be timid or tame or meh. It's not a snooty crowd. It's not... this isn't some sacred space. It is, but it's... the fans are part of the team dynamic. It's part of the home court advantage. You're part of the environment. And that's been the case forever. When it comes to team sports. like the fan investment. The fans are part of the fans are part of the product. The fans are part of the strategy. We're supposed to get loud at home. We're supposed to try and get in your head. Now there are limits, like obviously shouldn't be no death threats, people. Like that should be really obvious. I don't understand, like, because I see this on social media too. And I hear people talk about getting death threats, and I'm like, why are we threatening to kill people on the internet? Or at sporting events? Or threatening people's families? You're not a mob boss, and they shouldn't be doing it either. Like, it's petty. It's sick. It's wrong. I say petty. Petty is like way too tame. It's unacceptable. But other than that, call people whatever you want. I think people should be able to say whatever they want. And the players should be allowed to do exactly the same back. I love what Kyrie was doing. You know, I mean, I'm not someone who's myself would be flipping the bird to people. But if they're going to be hurling, you know, all the swear words I'm not going to say on this channel, you know, scratch the back of your head and flip a double bird, that's the energy they're sending. That's the energy they should be receiving. I think I just hit the mic. I'm not gonna get up in arms or upset about it. I'm not gonna be that. It's not what I would do necessarily. Although I would trash talk back. I've always found different ways to trash talk. When I was playing like pickup sports or freaking Call of Duty, the Xbox 360 era of game chat. Dude, those days were wild. And the Sixers, so far, or at least in game one, handled the Raptors. Embiid played awesome, but the team also played really well around him. I think some people have not given... I think some people don't give the Sixers supporting cast enough credit. Like, Tyrese Maxey has been awesome. They have some really good role guys, although they have lacked some shooting. Like, Tobias Harris, since he signed his big contract extension, has not been as good. He's had stretches where he's been really good, but he's not played up to, like, where he was with the Clippers and how he was playing the first like couple years in Philly, like before that extension, which is unfortunate. I really like Tobias. He's one of my Tennessee guys, but that just hasn't worked for him. And then the East is really complex right now because there are cases you could make for just about any of the teams to win. Because Celtics Nets is going to be fascinating. I will say, though, by the numbers, the Celtics look to me like the best team in the East. And they performed against the best teams in the league this year better than anyone, including the Phoenix Suns. And I'll say this, as good as the Grizzlies have been in the regular season, there's a difference between playoff basketball and regular season basketball. And I was really worried that this was a team that would end up or that could end up disappointing in the playoffs. I knew the Jazz would. I knew the Jazz would disappoint. They always do, and they will, because as great as Gobert is statistically as a regular season defender, he gets exposed in the playoffs every year, offensively and defensively. Dallas is doing it, or Dallas really took it to him in game 2. Jalen Brunson and Maxi Kleber and this is the reason I believe Kleber is extremely valuable. It's for these kind of matchups. Kleber can kill you as a spacer at the 5 spot. He can destroy your defense by allowing that team to play 5 out and hit outside shots and create driving lanes. That's what, to me, that's why guys like Jaren Jackson, Bam Adebayo, DeAndre Ayton, obviously Draymond Green, and a bunch of other guys, Robert Williams, for example. Those guys are to me truly more valuable. Giannis Antetokounmpo. Your elite wing defenders, yeah, their stats on a lot of the advanced metrics aren't as good, but it's a product of who they're defending and what that role is. What Michael Bridges does on a nightly basis, in my opinion, is more difficult than what Rudy Gobert does. He has a higher degree of difficulty job, and he's been awesome all year. Marcus Smart just won Defensive Player of the Year. I don't agree with that, by the way. I don't agree with that. I'm not saying that I don't want to say it's undeserved, but I think Jason Tatum has been was a more valuable defender this year. And I'd argue that Robert Williams was definitely a little more impactful. But Smart's always been an awesome defender, awesome perimeter defender. And I'm glad to see some perimeter guys getting rewarded, and especially a guard getting awarded Defensive Player of the Year. I just don't know if it should have been Smart this year. Because I think I would have gone with Jaren Jackson or Bam Adebayo or Jason Tatum or Michael Bridges over Marcus Smart. And there was still an argument for Joel Embiid this year, although I don't think he was as good defensively as he's been in years past. And there was still an argument, and that's why Rudy Gobert was one of the final 3. There's still an argument for Rudy Gobert. I just think at this point, it's incredible just how different the regular season and the playoffs are in the NBA. Everything everything changes in the playoffs. With that being said, we're going to move to the NFL Draft preview section. And we're going to blow through the NFC West tonight. Thought I went back to the previous page. Well, if I can find my arrow. There it is. Okay. So. Okay, here we are. So we're at starting with the Arizona Cardinals tonight. I know back, I guess it's been at some point last month. I think I went through some of the, I don't think I went through any of these depth charts on the channel. I think I was just reading through stuff on my own. But for the Cardinals right now, so this is interesting. They've got AJ Green still here. I think it's because AJ Green hasn't signed anywhere yet, but he's still a free agent. He has not re-signed with the team. I think I saw a guy on one of the depth charts yesterday that I was like, I'm pretty sure he's a free agency right now, and I don't think he's re-signed. So I'm not going to include Green here, unless I missed something, but last time I checked, Green had not been re-signed. DeAndre Hopkins will be back healthy. They've got Rondale Moore, who is perfect for his role in that offense. Beyond that, they've got 7 guys on the depth chart. Or, 4 other guys on the depth chart, sorry, because Green's not re-signed. I just named Hopkins and Moore. And Andy Isabella just hasn't really lived up to it, to what people hoped. And I like Greg Dortch. I've always liked Greg Dortch as a potential slot guy, but he's never really broken in the league that way. Or, he's just never forced a role. And then Andre Bacalia and Anton Wesley, who I'm going to be completely honest with, I'm not really familiar with him at all. Cardinals really need receiver help. And, for a while, I've really thought that they had needs elsewhere, but I honestly kind of assumed Christian Kirk would be back because I didn't think he was going to get the kind of money he got. And they could still bring back A.J. Green, but I'll tell you what, their receiver depth chart is super thin. When it comes to the offensive line, DJ Humphries, starting left tackle. It took him a while, but he's developed into a really good starting left tackle. The Cardinals have Justin Pugh that they've, or in at left guard, which is really solid. Rodney Hudson, of course, who I talked about, the Raiders traded him away going into 2020, which a lot of people thought was a head scratcher. The Cardinals have brought in Will Hernandez to play right guard. Brought him over from the Giants. I think he'll fit their offense better. I also just think the Giants haven't had the best coaching. Hernandez, when he came out, I thought he was a borderline. Like, he went at the top of the second round. I thought he could sneak into the back of the first round. He was one of the best run-blocking guards I'd ever seen, technique-wise, when he was coming out of the draft. So, I'm bullish on him being able to improve. And then they've got Kelvin Beachum at right tackle right now. They've got 2020 third-round pick Josh Jones, who's kind of their swing tackle. I think he'll eventually take over that right tackle spot. He could even do so this year. They've also got former 7th-round pick Joshua Miles. He's backing up at left tackle, but Josh Jones is really their top tackle. On the inside, well, let's see. Who are their other backup tackles? Coda Martin and Eric Smith. Fringe guys. Interior backups, you got Sean Harlow, Marcus Henry, Justin Murray. I like Murray as a rotational lineman. Danny Isidora. Isidora was a guy who I remember when he was coming out, there were a lot of scouts that really liked his potential. Maybe he just needed a change of scenery. Haggai Indabuisi. College free agent in 22, but the draft hasn't happened. That doesn't make sense. Anyway. Because usually you see the CF, that's an undrafted free agent, like a college free agent from the year they were drafted. But the draft doesn't happen until next Thursday, so either that's interesting. For the longest time, I've had interior line as kind of the big need for them. But I don't know. I mean, definitely you would need to upgrade, or Justin Pugh's not going to last forever at this point. He's had injury issues. He could be gone any year now, but their depth other than Justin Murray, I'm not super excited about for the Cardinals. So, that's one of the positions I think they really need to address. But I think they don't need to do that in the first round right now, necessarily. If they got Zion Johnson, if they got Kenyon Green, I think that'd be awesome. But I'm not foreseeing it being a given here. At tight end, they re-signed Zach Ertz. Max Williams is back healthy. And he started off the year really great. And the reason they traded for Ertz was because Williams got hurt. I like Steven Anderson as a depth tight end. David Wells is nice kind of tight end fullback option who also can play special teams. Dion Yetter. Of course, I love my man Alex Ellis, who played at Tennessee. He's a really good special teams guy, role player, solid. He's a solid blocker. He can also play some fullback, H-back. Bernard Sekovitz. I've never heard of him. And then beyond that, quarterback, of course, Kyler Murray's back after a little bit of drama. They re-signed Colt McCoy to be his backup. That was a solid move. And they brought in Trace McSorley, which I think is actually a really good fit, too, as a third-string quarterback in this offense. Running back, they re-signed James Conner to a deal that maybe is a little rich. They got, Benjamin now as their second running back. I know a lot of people really liked him out of Arizona State, especially as a receiving type back in 2020. We'll see if he holds on to that role. And then they've got undrafted free agent Jonathan Ward is still around, and they brought in Jalen Samuels from the Steelers, who can play running back, fullback, can make plays in the passing game. I like bringing him in as a versatile player who can kind of do multiple things and play special teams. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Cardinals during the draft drafted a somewhat comparable player to James Conner because of Conner's medical history. I think it'd be wise. Or someone who's like Chase Edmonds, who they lost in free agency. Going on over to the defense, I really like their starting defensive line. Of course, when healthy, J.J. Watt's still awesome. Leki Fotu is a really good nose tackle. That was a solid draft pick in the 4th round back in 2020. Zach Allen has been solid. There were some people who were comparing him to like a discount store version of J.J. Watt when he was coming out of college, and I could see it. He's not necessarily been that, but he's been a solid player. Behind them, they also have their other 4th round pick from 2020, Rashard Lawrence. They brought in Matt Dickerson from the Titans, he's not really big, but he's a run stopper kind of role player. He just kind of a clogger type player. He's a solid rotational depth guy. And then Michael Dogby, who was a 7th round pick in 2019. And then they brought in Jonathan Ledbetter, who's been kind of a fringe player in the league for a long time. He has some like interesting physical traits, but he's never really translated them into anything or into production. Moving to their edge players, they've got Marcus Golden. They have Devon Kennard, and that's a solid 2-piece, but I like both of them better. Well, Golden has turned into like a starter. Kennard, I still feel like is more of a rotational guy. Behind them, they have literally no depth because they only have 2 other players. 2021 6th round pick, Victor Dimukeje, and undrafted free agent Dennis Gardeck, which Gardeck is more of a special teams guy. They just re-signed him to a free agent contract, and I really like him, but he's undersized, and he can rush the edge. He's actually, now that I'm thinking about the scouting report on him, people thought he played a lot of edge in college, but people thought he was too small for that. But he's actually fairly effective as a rotational edge, but really only as a pass rusher, not really as a run defender. Like, he can't really set the edge. But you need more than 4 guys on your depth chart, and really they really need an upgrade over Kennard. That's why pass rush has been another thing that that's been really high on my list for them. At inside linebacker, you got Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins, which Collins can play some edge as well. He's a big guy. I mean, he's like 6'4", like he was. I mean, I want to say at Tulsa he played at like 6'4", 260. But he can move. He's solid in coverage. They've got a really great 1-2 punch up from their last 2 first-round picks. Nick Vigil is a really solid third linebacker. I think they're super happy with that. And then beyond that, though, you've got just some other fringe guys like Tanner Vallejo, Ezekiel Turner, and Joe Walker. Out of those 3 guys, I think Walker is probably my favorite of those. But I could see them making a depth pick at linebacker at some point in the draft, like on day 3. Just to get another body in there who could potentially pop down the road. At corner, Marco Wilson solidified a starting spot after being picked in the 4th round 2021. That whole shoe throw incident in that LSU game, yeah, it was a little boneheaded. But I've seen stuff like that go completely unflagged that was way more egregious. That, like, stopped the game, delayed the game when a team was trying to go no huddle after a successful offensive play. Not, throwing the shoe after, like, a big stop. I don't know. I think that was... I think there was a little bit of an overreaction to what he did, but the scouting community and his draft stock in response, him dropping to the 4th round, was ridiculous. And he's looked good. They brought in Jeff Gladney, who's getting a second chance that, considering the guy was acquitted of all the charges that got him cut from the Vikings, if he's really innocent, I hope that he runs with this because he looked good as a rookie. And then they've got Byron Murphy, who's really good. He can play inside and out, but he's going to be maximized as a slot player. But he can move around because you can play Budda Baker in the slot too. Let's see, their depth at corner behind these top 3 guys. I love Breon Borders. Hate to see these now in the Titans because I think he's a nice role-playing corner, like a rotational corner who can give you some snaps. They have Nate Brooks. They also have Jace Whitaker, who's an undrafted free agent in 2020. I could see them taking a stab at corner in the draft. Some people have them drafting corner in the 1st round. I think there are... I thought it was pretty obvious that interior line, edge, or corner were the top 3 until looking at their depth chart recently. And I almost think wide receiver is now most important because they have no depth in comparison to some of these other positions. At safety, of course, I mentioned Budda Baker, who's awesome. Jalen Thompson has been a solid fit for them after them spending a 5th round supplemental draft pick in 2019 on him. They also have 2019 5th round pick Deontay Johnson and 7th round pick last year James Wiggins, who I was kind of shocked Wiggins fell to the 7th round. He and Brady Breeze were guys that I thought would end up higher or going earlier on day 3. And then they also have Javon Hagan. I think their safety spot is good. I think you've got young guys that you're trying to develop that you should give a shot here. And you have a stud at the other safety spot with Baker. So if we're looking back over the roster, I really do think now that wide receiver, looking at the depth chart, wide receiver is the number 1 need for the Cardinals, period. If they bring back A.J. Green, that kind of helps, but they need guys who are more than, a 1 year at a time option. So I would imagine that doesn't mean the Cardinals have to take that or make that pick on day one, but I'd argue they need to take multiple picks. They need to take multiple stabs at this. And considering they've got Rondale Moore and Andy Isabella is still there going into last year of his contract, and they've got Dortch on the depth chart, I think they've got slot guys. They need outside guys. And if a Chris Olave or Jahan Dotson's on the board at 23, I think they'd be a really good complement to what they have in Hopkins. They could also go with a really big athletic-bodied guy like a Treylon Burks or a Drake London, if he were available, or Christian Watson. I mean, your second receiver, like when you have a guy like Moore and you have a guy like Hopkins, you can really kind of fit whatever type of guy you want. They have been trying, the Cardinals though have been really trying to find a big-bodied receiver because they've spent picks on, for one, Hakeem Butler, also in that 2019 draft. So I could see them going after a guy later in the draft. Well, I could see them taking a guy like London or Burks up top, or Watson. Or if you wait till day 2, you've got guys like Alec, or a guy like Alec Pierce from Cincinnati, who's in that day 2 range, who's 6'3", 211, 4.4 speed, 40.5-inch vertical, has really good tape. Or you take a home run swing on day 3 with a guy like Isaiah Weston out of Northern Iowa, who only had like 37 catches last year, but was still like first team All Missouri Valley Conference because the team ran like 100 more times than they threw, and even on those like 340 something pass attempts, they only completed like 54% of them. Because their 3 quarterbacks were all kind of horrid. Or another small school guy, Idaho State's, I believe it's Tanner Connor, who is a physical freak, who kind of profiles as like a physical matchup guy, but he had a crazy workout at University of Washington's pro day because he's originally from the Seattle area, so they allowed him to be a part of their pro day, and he was the most athletic player there. But they need guys. They need multiple guys. I think for a solid role-playing type guy, a John Mechie on day 2 would be a really good fit for them as well. Because he's also going to help in the run game because of his blocking. So receiver to me is a tier 1 need for them. And I would argue that they have, I think that's the tier 1 need because it has to be addressed, and probably with multiple picks. Interior line, edge rusher, or really just front 7 in general, because they need depth and rotational pieces. I would say edge though before interior, and corner before interior defensive line. Like, those are all their tier 2 needs, but they could be addressed in the first round because of the depth of receiver. Like, these 4 spots have to be addressed in the draft, but you need to get the right value at each spot. So, you can take these in any order. And then I would say linebacker depth is definitely, like, coverage linebacker or middle linebacker depth is important too. But I would argue in this draft, if they can, take multiple swings at receiver, and I'd argue taking multiple swings at edge. So, that's the Cardinals. Well, and I guess I'll kind of throw some ideas out here. If they go corner in the first round, I think considering the style of Marco Wilson, Jeff Gladney, well, I mean, I don't I don't know if they need to in the first round. I think they could go high upside with that pick. A guy that maybe is a little more raw, like a Tariq Woolen on day 2 would be really interesting because of his just physical abilities. I think I'll bring up Zion McCollum. I think anybody should try and draft Zion McCollum if they need corner. Because I think he might be, I think arguably he's as high an upside player in the draft as Derek Stingley and Ahmad Gardner. He just doesn't have the level of competition, hasn't played the same level of competition in college. So there's a little more projection there. And Tariq Woolen's also right there when it comes to, just physical talent. But I think out of those 4 guys, he's the most raw. If we're talking edge, I've seen people talk about I've seen Karlaftis to the Cardinals, and I don't love that fit. I don't love his fit in their scheme. He could maybe play inside and out, but I don't love his fit for the style they play. I would rather see... I just think Karlaftis needs to play in a kind of a traditional 4-3 role or 4-3 end role. Because I don't necessarily know if he could hold up as a 5 technique in a 3-4. And I don't think he can hold up as a 3-4 outside linebacker from a coverage standpoint. I just don't think it's a good fit for him. And even though you're in the nickel a lot anyway, I don't love his fit with Arizona. I'd much rather see Arnold Ebiketie or Aboye Mafe, which of course I've got those guys rated ahead of Karlaftis anyway. So they could be a team that should absolutely take a chance if David Ojabo falls into the 20s because of the Achilles. That guy's upside's ridiculous, and he had really good production, and I don't care that he was across from Aiden Hutchinson. I think he's legit. Interior line, that's something they can wait until the middle rounds of the draft. I've mentioned a lot of guys. If you've been on the show or if you've tuned into the show, there's a lot of different guys. Depending on what they want to do. And there's some guys I haven't mentioned, like Darian Kennard, who I don't think fits as well for the Cardinals scheme. I think he'd be better on a more power focused scheme. Although I guess he could play guard for anyone. Kennard out of Kentucky. I do really like the fit. I like a lot of the interior linemen. Like Dylan Parham could play center or guard for you. And of course, if you went in the first round, Kenyon Green, Zion Johnson, it's hard to go wrong there. Maybe they're a team that looks at a guy like Tyler Smith as a guy who you could start off at guard, and as you're polishing him up to eventually develop him to potentially kick outside to tackle. For a team looking for depth, but a guy who could eventually take over as a starter, Zach Tom is one of my favorite players in the draft because he can literally play all 5 positions on the line. Because he's done it. And then a day 3 linebacker that kind of fits what somewhere around the Simmons Collins mold. I keep forgetting his first name, but I believe his last name is Robinson from Kansas. Really, really good athlete. I am a fan of his. he's just, he's played for Kansas, so he's not on the national radar. But I think he's higher on a lot of teams' boards than a lot of your, media or YouTube scouting community guys. And if instead they just wanted to go with a really cerebral guy they could get on day 3, Jack Sanhorn from from Wisconsin. Oh my gosh. Would be a really sick day 3 snag. So yeah, there's that. Moving on to the Rams. Now the Rams will not pick until, I don't think they've got a pick. I don't think they have a second round pick because they traded their second round pick to the Broncos. I don't think they pick until the 3rd round. But they have a great roster. So right now their slated starters up front are Van Jefferson, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp. Behind them, they have 2021 second round pick Tutu Atwell, who some people are like, he didn't get on the field last year hardly. That was a wasted pick. They were deep at receiver. They're developing Atwell. I think they're going to use him more as a returner as things move on. People need to calm down. They've also got Ben Skowronek, who they drafted in the 7th round of 2021. He's a solid kind of role-playing possession player. J.J. Koski, who's a undrafted free agent in 2020. He's been on their practice squad. Warren Jackson, Landon Akers, and Brandon Powell. Don't be shocked if they drafted a guy on day 3 because they like to draft a receiver pretty much every year, but they don't need to. And I have a feeling Odell Beckham is going to be back sooner or later. They're going to re-sign him. He wants to be back. On the offensive line, they've extended Joe Noteboom. A lot of people are like, they gave him a lot of money for a guy who hadn't really started. He's been their swing tackle. He has played. They know him better than anyone, and they have believed that he was going to be their left tackle of the future. That he has been the plan and is the plan to replace Whitworth. David Edwards is starting at left guard for them. They re-signed Brian Allen this offseason. I mentioned with Carolina, they had it listed as a trade. Austin Corbett going to the Panthers from the Rams. He was not traded. That was just a free agent signing. Bobby Evans, 2019 third-round pick, is stepping into the right guard spot. But that's going to be a camp battle for sure. I actually see both of these starting spots at guard being up for grabs. And then Rob Havenstein is still starting at right tackle, which is solid. Their depth at the position or on the offensive line, that's something that they're going to need to address. Chandler Brewer and Alaric Jackson, which a lot of people, there were some people that really liked Alaric Jackson, other people who were really low on him. But most people thought he was going to get drafted. He went undrafted last year. And then behind those two guys are Max Percher and Adrian Ely. I don't love their tackle depth right now because I was one of those people that was a little lower on Alaric Jackson. I think depth there's something that's going to need to be addressed. On the inside, you've got Tremaine Ankrum, 7th round pick in 2020. Coleman Shelton, who they got off Arizona's practice squad. And Jeremiah Colon, who has been with the team mostly on the practice squad after being drafted, after going undrafted in 2018. They need to address offensive line depth for sure. I'd imagine you're going to see multiple offensive line picks in this draft. Tight end, Tyler Higbee is still the starter. They've got Kendall Blanton still ahead of Bryson Hopkins. I don't know if that's going to stick. Now, Blanton is a much better blocker than Hopkins, but I think Hopkins, especially after the way he played in the Super Bowl in the second half, he's going to get opportunities in the receiving game. And he can really play a matchup role at tight end. Like he could split out. I loved Bryson Hopkins in the 2020 draft. He was one of my favorite prospects. I had him as I personally had him like, I want to say he was my 70th rated player. I thought he could go in the second round. He ended up going in the fourth. They also have 2021 fourth round pick Jacob Harris, who will also help with wide receiver depth. He is that matchup receiving type tight end. Like Hopkins can line up Y, wing, or some outside. Harris is a big matchup kind of receiver who definitely is raw, but they knew that. I believe they are going to turn him into something special. And then their last tight end on the depth chart is Kyle Markway. I think their tight end position I think they're in a great spot. Quarterback, obviously, Matthew Stafford. That was a home run. They love John Wolford as a backup. They brought in Bryce Perkins as an undrafted free agent 2020, and he's stuck around their practice squad and roster. Their running back room is really good. Cam Akers is going into this season hopefully healthy. It's amazing how quickly he recovered from a torn Achilles and was effective during their playoff run. Darrell Henderson slides into his more natural role as a secondary or as the rotational back, the change of pace. They love their top two backups, Jake Funk and Xavier Jones. And then a lot of people, I know a lot of people who are really kind of high on Javian Hawkins last year. I'm pretty sure he went undrafted. Hawkins profiles a really good receiving back. And then they've also got Raymond Calais, who they got off of the Bucks practice squad. And I want to say, I'm trying to remember who it was that was really high on Calais when he was coming out in the draft. Defensive line, Ashawn Robinson, Greg Gaines, and Aaron Donald. That's a really nice three-piece combo, especially with Donald being the best defensive player in the league and arguably the most impactful non-quarterback in the league. Gaines steps into the Sebastian Joseph Day spot, although Gaines has played a pretty big role for them since he's been drafted, and they're really high on him. Behind that, they've got their two 2021 day 3 picks, Bobby Brown III. I couldn't believe he slid to the fourth round. That guy's got as much talent as any big-bodied player I've ever seen. Until Jordan Davis. But, I mean, Bobby Brown's got ridiculous athleticism with great size. Ernest Brown, the fourth, who they drafted in the 5th round last year. I like him as a rotational interior guy. They like Marquise Copeland, who they've picked up as an undrafted free agent in 2019. He's stuck around. Jonah Williams, Michael Hote. All three of these guys are undrafted free agents who they've kept around. They value them. I don't think they're going to draft an interior defensive lineman. I think they've got plenty of depth and rotational guys here. Edge is a different story. Like, of course, they love Leonard Floyd. They believe in Terrell Lewis. He's going into year 3. He's got to produce, though. beyond them, there's really not a lot of proven depth like Justin Hollins, Chris Garrett, who's 7th round pick last year, and Anthony Hines. There's not a lot of upside there, and they definitely need someone who can compete for a starting job, and none of those guys, in my opinion, are really capable of that. Of course, they're starting inside linebackers now. They nailed the Ernest Jones pick last year. Bobby Wagner coming in is massive. They also have Traven Howard, who was 7th round pick in 2018, who is a fine rotational guy. I really liked him. I thought he had some upside coming out, but he's definitely better as kind of a rotational guy, depth guy. And then they've got Christian Roseboom, who they brought in off Kansas City's practice squad. They still need depth at inside. I think they could use at least one more guy in that rotation. Wouldn't be shocked to see them draft linebacker somewhere around like 6 or 7. At corner, of course, they still have Jalen Ramsey. David Long's going into last year of his rookie deal. He was a guy I really liked in that draft class. There was a lot of people who were really high on Robert Rochelle as a small school prospect last year. Heard his name a lot. He's slated in to start right now. And then they have Grant Haley, who's been kind of a fringe rotation guy during his career, and Tyler Hall, who they picked off waivers from Atlanta. They need more bodies at corner for sure. At safety, your penciled-in starters are Taylor Rapp and Jordan Fuller. Fuller got hurt last year. He really popped as a rookie in 2020, being a 6th round pick, and he was playing well. I mean, he looks legit. Of course, had a season-ending injury. He's going to be back. Rapp is more than solid. Nick Scott, 7th round pick in 2019. Terrell Burgess, who they drafted in the 3rd round in 2020, who was a really high upside player. A lot of people thought I want to say he went to school with another safety that was drafted that same year. Who I think his name was Blackman. I think he might be with the Seahawks, but people thought Blackman was better now, but that Burgess had more upside and would potentially be better later. We'll see. He's dealt with some injury issues as well. And then they've got Anton Brooks Jr. and Jake Gervasier behind him. The Rams have a really good roster, but I'll say for them it's not as much about starters, it's about depth. But I would say for me, the biggest places they need to hit are edge, corner, and interior line. And I would argue they might not necessarily have a tier. Well, I would say this. Their tier 1 needs are defensive end and corner in context for their team. Because they've done a really good job of developing late round picks and undrafted guys at corner. But they need bodies at corner. And they like playing Jalen Ramsey in the slot a lot. They love having him in, I'm trying to remember what they call that role. But, so they need guys who can play outside or play outside and inside. They're looking at later round guys. So Jacoby Durant, he's more of a slot guy, but he's just really good. He's got great tape. I think Alontae Taylor, for a long, physical outside corner, would be a really nice pickup for them as well. And he's got really good speed. And considering some of the receivers in the NFC West, having some speedy corners is kind of a must. If we're talking about edge, you're looking at Amari Barno, maybe ending up at the end of the third round. Sam Williams, because of some off the field red flags or some off the field baggage. He's a guy that could who would be extremely high upside, who would fit the Terrell Lewis, Leonard Floyd mold that they like for edge rushers. Trying to think of another underrated edge right now. Honestly, I'm just gonna kind of stick with saying Williams and Barno. That's the real high upside guys that I think could be. Or for a guy who didn't have the best workout, but could end up being a really solid pro. I think it's Kingsley Ingbare out of South Carolina. He had a slow 40 time. I still think the tape is solid with him, and I think they could get him in the fourth. And for interior line, if you're talking like day 3 target kind of guys, you've got Alec Lidstrom of Boston College. You've got Donovan West out of Arizona State. It seems like Luke Fortner of Kentucky has gotten out of the day 3 range and is going to potentially vie for a day 2 draft slot. We will see about that. Of course, a lot of those guys are centers. Chris Paul out of Tulsa at guard. He's probably my favorite guard who I think is going to go on day 3. Like, who doesn't... He might have a shot at day 2, but I think there are other guys that are ahead of him in that pecking order. But yeah. And once again, day 3 linebacker, I'm throwing Jack Sandhorn's name around like crazy. Because I just think he's a legit starter. Trying to think of the thing is, there's so many really good linebackers. I could see some of the guys who we think are going to go on day 2 dropping to day 3. Like, I think it'd be ludicrous, but I mean, it's entirely possible a Troy Anderson of Montana State somehow gets out of the top 100 picks. I couldn't fathom it, but it's absolutely possible because he's a small school guy. And there are so many guys at the position, it could drive down everybody's draft slot. And I think Darian Kennard could be an interesting fit for the Rams because he could play guard or be like a road grading like tackle in the run game. All right, let's speed through here. Let's get to San Francisco, which San Francisco is kind of an interesting spot right now with what I was talking about with Deebo Samuel. But they don't have a first round pick. Dadgummit. I'm trying to close that. There we go. Okay. So for now, Deebo Samuel is still on the team. if that does not change, I mean, if he stays, I don't think wide receiver is a massive need. Because they've still got Brandon Ayuk. They've got Jawan Jennings, who they love as a tough slot guy. They play a lot of 2 tight end. Beyond that, they've got some interesting guys they brought in as free agents this year or this offseason. Keyshawn Johnson, who was originally drafted by the Cardinals in the 6th round out of, I think it was it Fresno State? I think it was. You got Marcus Johnson, who a lot of Tennessee Titans fans, including myself, really like Johnson as a rotational receiver. Raymond McLeod, who's going to also help out in the return game. They also have Austin Mack, former Ohio State receiver, Connor Weddington, and Malik Turner, who they picked up from Dallas this offseason. But considering their offensive scheme, unless something happens with Debo, I don't think they're going to draft a receiver early, and they might not draft a receiver at all. On the offensive line, of course, they've got Trent Williams on a big deal. Mike McGlinchey is going into his 5th-year option season, so that's something to look at for him. They still got Alex Mack at center. Future Hall of Famer Alex Mack. And then they've got Daniel Brunskill and Colton McKivitz slated as their starters on the inside. They've still got Justin Skule. They drafted Aaron Banks in the 2nd round, which I thought was a little bit of a reach last year, for sure. They also have Jake Brandel still on the roster. All 3 of these guys could challenge for starting roles. I think Brandel has a brother on another team. And then they also have Keaton Sutherland, who they brought in. I could see them drafting interior line or a tackle. I forgot to mention their backup tackles. Jalen Moore, who they drafted in the 5th round last year, and Alfredo Gutierrez. I think tackle's definitely an option in the draft, depending on what they're planning to do with McGlinchey. Tight end, of course, you got Greg Kittle, arguably the best tight end in the league. I would argue the best all-around tight end in the league. Ross Dwelly, who they picked up as an undrafted free agent, he's been, they really trust him. Charlie Warner, who they drafted in the 6th round in 2020. They also have Tanner Hudson and Jordan Matthews, who is the former receiver who has bulked up to be kind of like a receiving tight end, it seems. Trying to restart his career. Quarterback Garoppolo's still there, but Trey Lance is the guy they want him to take that starting job. They also have Nate Sudfeld, who's kind of a solid backup option. Elijah Mitchell, who they took in the 6th round last year, is currently slated as their number 1 running back. That didn't shock me at all. Like, when I saw them draft him, I was like, because they traded up to get Sermon in the 3rd round. Trey Sermon, who's listed as their 4th running back right now. That's not going to last. But I saw them get Mitchell in the 6th round last year, and I was like, I wouldn't be shocked with their scheme if Mitchell ended up their number 1 back, considering some of the guys they've had as their number 1 in recent years, like Raheem Mostert. And there he is. I think Trey Sermon is actually the running back too, and Sermon and Mitchell are kind of, I think, 1A, 1B. They like Jeff Wilson. He's been kind of a solid rotational back, but that's all he is. JaMychal Hasty, is a fine back, but he's really fine if he's your 4th back, in my opinion, 3rd or 4th. And then they've got the best fullback in the league in Kyle Juszczyk, And then they got Josh Hokett, who's been kind of a practice squad guy for them. Is kind of an understudy of sorts. Moving to defense, Nick Bosa and D Ford, really good combo there on the edge. They brought in Kerry Hyder and Samson Ebukam last year. They have Kamoko Toure, who they brought in from Indianapolis. Charles Omanehu, who they traded for last season from Houston. They've got a lot of depth on the edge. And then Alex Barrett and Jordan Willis, who they got off waivers from the Jets. Like, they legitimately have 7. Like, to me, I'm not including Barrett here. They've got 7 guys who I really like at their spot on their depth chart. Like, are better than what pretty much any other team has at their spot on the depth chart behind their 2 starters. I mean, Nick Bosa is as good as anybody. D Ford at times has been a real impact player. But behind those guys, like, they've got tons of quality rotation guys. On the interior, Javon Kinlaw's first-round pick in 2020. They're really hoping going into year 3 that he takes a big step forward and really replicates. And really, they're hoping he'll end up. They were expecting him to be better than DJ Jones by now. The other starting interior slot is Eric Armstead, who can also play some on the edge, but he's a really great interior pass rusher, disruptor. They brought in Hassan Ridgeway from Philadelphia as kind of a run plugger depth player. Other than him, though, I kind of am shocked to see Kevin Givens ahead of Maurice Hurst, because Mo Hurst is a really, really good player. And then they also have Chris Slayton, who they brought in, who's another kind of run stuffer. Hurst still has real upside, and when he was with the Raiders, he had some really good production. And then they let him go. Of course, he had like that heart issue that came up at the combine his rookie year, or going into his rookie year, that knocked him down the draft boards, because he was like a second-round lock, if not a guy who could go in the first before that had happened. At linebacker, of course, they've got one of the best 2-man tandems in the league. Fred Warner, arguably the best in the league. And Dre Greenlaw's really good. Greenlaw, of course, going into last year of his rookie deal. Behind them, Aziz Al-Shair and Demetrius Flanagan Fowles, who are both undrafted free agents in 2019. They brought in Oren Burks from Green Bay, who I think could absolutely press for their third-string linebacker spot. And then Curtis Robinson, who was a street free agent last year. I could see them drafting a guy because they may not be able to afford to bring Dre Greenlaw back. We'll see. Moving to corner, they brought in Charvarius Ward from Kansas City. They've got Emmanuel Mosley, he's an outside guy. He's not really a slot. Ambry Thomas, I think, played more in the slot for them. But, and they also drafted DeCommodore Lenoir in the 5th round of 2021 after drafting Jordan Thomas. They still have Deontay Johnson around, who they drafted in the 4th round in 2014, but he's not really, or I say Deontay Johnson. But he's never really played a huge role. They brought in Darqueze Dennard as a free agent. And they've brought in Kadar Holman as a free agent this offseason. But corner's definitely a need here still, because I think Mosley's going into, I think after his original undrafted contract, ran out when they extended him. I want to say he's in the last year of his second contract, or his first like real NFL contract, like multi-year deal. Travarius Ward they just paid, but Ward to me is really a second corner. Or so then at safety they lost Jaquiski Tart. They still have Jimmy Ward, who's the better of their two safeties. They brought in George Odom from Indianapolis. They're hoping he can lock down the starting spot. And they've drafted a couple guys the last two, or in recent years, like Tavarius Moore, who was a third-round pick in 2018. I think they may have re-upped him to like a one-year deal, but he's a really high up. He was a guy who was seen as having really high upside, but he's just not developed. And they drafted Talanoa Hufanga last year, but he's more of a box safety type. I could see them drafting a pure like center fielding, zone coverage, rangy safety at some point on day 3. If we're looking at the needs though for the team, I would say your tier 1 needs here are very much corner and offensive line. Which for me, like the Niners have a great roster. When tier 1 doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for every team. It's just we're saying based on what the roster looks like, this is what you need to go after. I think there's an argument that can be made for going after receiver depth, but I think they brought in all these other guys because they see them. These are depth guys. All we need are depth guys. Because I still think they're hoping, even with everything that's happened, they're going to get a deal done with Deebo Samuel. And while they've drafted guys on the offensive line, I really think a high upside offensive tackle, I mean, you just can't pay everyone. And I don't know if Mike McGlinchey's been so good that he warrants, being paid big money instead of just being replaced with a cheaper option or another option who's going to be cheaper for like the next few years. But really, they can focus mostly on just best player available, which is what they're going to do. Some interesting fits, though, for them, like scheme-wise, say they were going to try and replace Deebo Samuel in this draft. The closest you're getting to a Deebo Samuel in this draft is probably Treylon Burks, and they don't have a shot at him. After that, though, Calvin Austin's an interesting option. He's nowhere near as big, but he is extremely dynamic as an athlete. And once you get the ball in his hands, Wan'Dale Robinson's another guy who can be used really well as a gadget type player. If they wanted to, say, get another Brandon Ayuk, Sky Moore profiles in that sort of way. And once again, they're not going to have a shot at him, but Christian Watson, or at least unless they traded Samuel and got a guy, they're not going to have a shot at Treylon Burks or Christian Watson. Which Watson did a lot of end-arounds and played out of the backfield even at North Dakota State. Like they had him run routes out of the backfield. They loved running like seam concepts with him at running back at times. Watson's a very interesting player, which is why he's one of my like favorite guys in the draft. He might be like, regardless of my rankings, he might be my favorite prospect in the draft. And for their zone scheme, I'm going to, for half the league, Dylan Parham is a potential stud. on the interior line. I think Luke Fortner would be really good here too, as kind of like a future replacement for Alex Mack, because they need to be thinking about that too. And then finally, we're going to get to Seattle, which Seattle went from having not a lot of draft picks to now having a first and multiple seconds. By the way, just an interesting note for Denver during the draft. Despite all the picks that they did trade in the trade for Russell Wilson, they still have 8 draft picks in this draft. So they're not hurting for, they don't have a first round pick, but they're going to get plenty of chances to take or to get some young contributors on rookie contracts. So for the Seahawks, the one strength of their roster is definitely their receiver room. Metcalf and Lockett are an awesome pair. I really like Freddie Swain, Penny Hart, and Dwayne Eskridge as kind of role players around them. Swain and Eskridge have really great long speed and dynamism. Penny Hart, to me, profiles to me as a potential, top end slot receiver. And he played that part at times last year. And then Aaron Fuller's an interesting role guy. He went undrafted in 2020. He didn't test as well at the combine as some people expected coming out of Washington. But he was a really good contested catch player. So I still like him. Cade Johnson, who went undrafted last year out of South Dakota State, was one of my favorite day 3 prospects last year. Another guy that I just saw as a really solid role-playing receiver. I would love for them to cut him in preseason and the Titans to pick him up. And then they also have Cody Thompson and Matt Cole. Once again, they just need to get a deal done with DK Metcalf. But I like their receiver room. I don't think they need to mess with it. When it comes to offensive line, really feel like they ought to try and bring back Dwayne Brown. But that also depends on the draft. It seems even more likely now that Charles Cross is going to be there. If Charles Cross is available for them at 9, they need to go ahead and take him. Because then they can move Stone Forsythe to right tackle and push Jake Curran back to a swing role where he should fit better. They also have Greg Island, who went undrafted last year, a little surprisingly to me, who currently is their 3rd offensive tackle. They only have 3 offensive tackles on the depth chart. They're going to address the line in this draft, for sure. When it comes to the interior, they brought in Austin Blythe from Kansas City. They still have Gabe Jackson, who they traded for, was it last year or the year before last? But they brought him in from the Raiders. He's solid. Damian Lewis took strides in year 2. He got better. I think their starters are solid, at least for this year on the interior, but they need to look to improve for the future because Kyle Fuller isn't going to turn into a starter. Neither is Dakota Shapley. Phil Haynes hasn't yet, so why would he, in year 4 necessarily? Pierre Oliver Lestage was an undrafted free agent last year. Tackle's a huge need here. And I like Stone Forsythe. There were some people who had Stone Forsythe last year in their top 100 players. I know Matt Bowen did, or like around that top 100 range, and he went in the 6th round out of Florida. He's got really good tools for the tackle position, but I like him better as a right tackle. Tight end, they brought in Noah Fant. They're working on an extension with him because he's going into, I think he's going to the last year of his rookie contract, like his 5th-year option year, or he's up for his 5th-year option. Something like that. I love Fant. I think he's great. They've got Will Dissly, who's a really solid second stringer there. They drafted Colby Parkinson in the 4th round of 2020. And then behind him, they've got Tyler Mabry, who was an undrafted free agent in 2020. Their tight end room's solid. More than solid. The Seahawks apparently in-house, Brady Henderson of ESPN has reported that they like Drew Lock in Seattle. They think he has a lot of untapped potential, and they think he hasn't been put in the best situation to succeed from a offensive coaching standpoint. They think that, or this coaching staff thinks they can do better. We'll see. Geno Smith is the backup there, and then they brought in Jacob Eason, who got waived by Indianapolis last year. Running back, they've got Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. Penny finally looked or played like a first-round running back last year. He had his 5th-year option declined, though, by that point. He's back on a pretty reasonable 1-year deal. So he'll be battling Chris Carson. They've got DJ Dallas, who they drafted in the 4th round of 2020, who also does a lot of special team stuff for them. Travis Homer is still there. And then Josh Johnson and Darwin Thompson. I believe Thompson was on the Chiefs for a little bit, or for a couple years. And then they've got Nick Bellore at fullback, who they brought in from Detroit, I think going into last season. Defensive line, which I'll say this, for the Seahawks running back could be an option just because DJ Dallas isn't, like, he's a rotational guy. He's a depth guy. He's not a starter. Maybe Penny keeps it up and they end up re-signing him, but if that happens, Chris Carson's probably not long for the Seahawks. They probably are going to need another guy. And no disrespect to Homer. Homer had some, like, his rookie year, because of injuries, like, he popped for, like, a couple games, but then he's not really been able to beat out these other guys. And then Johnson and Thompson they're not going to make the final roster for this regular season. So, moving to defense, they got Shelby Harris as part of the Russell Wilson trade. Solid starter there. Poona Ford is solid. I really like him. They brought in Quentin Jefferson from Las Vegas. L.J. Collier is a former first-round pick who can play kind of inside-outside. They've re-signed Al Woods. You got Brian Monet, who's a undrafted free agent 2019. He's just been kind of a fringe guy there. I could see them drafting interior line, even with all these kind of, fringe guys back here. Alan Tohan, or Tohagum, Tohan. Okay, Alex. Oh, that's a C. Alex Changam, Niles Scott, Jared Hunt, and Miles Adams. And I would say Brian Monet. Like, all those guys are replaceable. That shouldn't preclude them from drafting anyone. Poona Ford shouldn't have gone and drafted his rookie year, 2018. But they could use some depth along the front seven. I love the new defensive coaching staff they brought in. Darrell Taylor is slated at one starting spot on the edge. That Leo position, 2020 second-round pick. He really made big strides last year. They brought in Uchenna Nwosu from the Chargers. I think that was a solid move. They've got Alton Robinson, who they drafted in the 5th round last year. LJ Collier can play edge, but they need more. There's 3 positions to look for with their first round pick, and it's offensive tackle, it's edge rusher, and it's corner. But Pete Carroll and John Schneider have tended to shy away from first round corners. So I'm kind of expecting offensive tackle if Charles Cross is on the board, or edge if one of Walker, Johnson, or Thibodeau are on the board. I also wouldn't count out them trading down from 9. But they've got to get more bodies at the edge right now. Jordan Brooks is taking over as their number 1 linebacker. They believe Cody Barton could be their number 2. Behind them, you've got John Radigan, and they've signed Joel Bunaway. From Chicago. Ben Burkervin's also here. I kind of feel like he's actually their third running back. He should be on this second string role here. Because they really like him. Tanner Muse is here. And then Lakeem Williams and Aaron Donker. I could see them drafting a linebacker at some point as well. And then corner. I love Trey Brown, formerly of Oklahoma, 4th round pick last year. Was one of my favorite guys in that range. They've got Sidney Jones and Justin Coleman. Justin Coleman is back in Seattle, where he kind of originally broke out as a slot corner. I've always liked Sidney Jones as a prospect. Unfortunately, he tore his Achilles during the draft process, or right at the end of his last season in college. And he's never played in the pros like he did in college. And in college, he looked like a potential top shelf corner. They've also brought in Artie Burns, who after his rookie season in Pittsburgh, it seemed like he got worse every year. They've got John Reed, who they traded for from Houston, and 2019 4th round pick Ugo Amadi, who also just hasn't developed like some of their other, day 3 corner picks. They also have Mike Jackson at the position. I think they need a number 1 corner. I wouldn't be shocked if Ahmad Gardner's on the board at 9. I feel like it's gonna be hard for them to not pick him. And I'd say the same for Derek Stingley. I think it's going to be hard for them to pass up one of those guys. But it depends on if Charles Cross or one of the top edge rushers is on the board, and what their grades are on those guys. But corner's a definite need. Safety is actually their best position. They've got Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs taking up more money than any safety tandem in the league. I think by far. They've got Marquise Blair. Marquise Blair, I think, was the other safety I was thinking of, who's from Utah. It wasn't Black. Or maybe, no. Because he was from 2019. Burgess was 2020. But they drafted Blair in the second round in 2019. And he was so good that he was beat out by Diggs, and they felt the need to trade for Jamal Adams. So there's that. Then they've also got Ryan Neal, and then my man Nigel Warrior, former Tennessee guy who I really like. They got him off waivers from Baltimore. Like I said, tier 1 needs for the Seahawks: left tackle, corner, and edge. Because I like Taylor and I like Nwosu. You need more than 2 guys. And Nwosu really, I think, is best as your third pass rushing option. And as much as I really like Darrell Taylor, he seems like he's a number 2. He hasn't proven that he he can be your number one guy yet. But he has the tools to get there. After that, I think kind of a more athletic big guy like a Nathan Jones of UConn. Is it Nathan Jones? Travis Jones of UConn, or further down the board, or I would say further down the board, like Fedarian Mathis out of Alabama would be interesting moves, or a LeBron Ray, or just a younger run plugger like Noah Ellis, who played at Idaho, or just, across the state line. I say just across the entire state of Washington from Seattle, but from that kind of Pacific Northwest area, I think would be an interesting fit, or a good fit as kind of a nose tackle type for them. And then you could say linebacker depth and just offensive line depth in general. I think they could use multiple picks on the offensive line here. If we're addressing tackle later, Bernard Raymond's an interesting developmental guy. There's a lot of developmental guys, but, there's not a lot of guys that you feel like you could plug them in right away while developing them, I think. But that's just my own personal opinion. If you think Stone Forsythe can be your left tackle of the future, I think Abraham Lucas would be a really interesting pick in the second round at right tackle. Because that's where he played his entire career. Really good pass protector, but considering how much they like to run, I don't know. They may not love him. I think Zach Tom would be a great fit for their offense. I think Jamarie Sawyer out of Georgia would be an interesting guy down the board to plug in at, or to challenge for a starting position at guard. But I think interior line, you could wait until like day 3, the middle of day 3, like the 5th round to address. But you've got to take a shot at tackle somewhere, and maybe multiple. Some edge guys that kind of profile the way they like. I look at Amari Barno, and I see a lot of Bruce Irvin. And Pete Carroll and John Schneider obviously drafted Bruce Irvin in the first round. A lot of people didn't have him in their first round when they drafted him. I'm not saying they'll draft Amari Barno in the first round. That would be crazy. But some guys who kind of profile in that, or in that mold kind of later. Like, I don't think they'll have a shot at Arnold Ebiketie, but there's seems like a wide range of opinions on Boye Mafe. They might have a shot at Mafe in the second round. He'd be really interesting. But I think Amari Barno really fits. And he's really good against the run. Like, this is a guy, I think back in 2020, he led the NCAA in tackles for loss. He's raw, but Barno's got a ton of physical tools and upside to develop. So that is the NFC West. That's the show for tonight. I will be back tomorrow with more. We will be... I kind of want to save the AFC South for last, so I might do the NFC South for tomorrow, but we'll see. It'll be one of those two. You'll know by the title. And... yeah, that's about it. So that's the Wednesday show. After that, we won't be going through depth charts anymore. If I'm talking about the draft, I'm going to be talking about prospects specifically. We're definitely going to talk more NBA after I get through this preview series, or this kind of going through the depth charts and previewing kind of what teams need, what teams' rosters look like right now. We'll talk about fits over the next week before the draft. Like I said, I won't be able to stream from the beginning of the first round of the draft, but as soon as I get home from Beast Feast, which, hey, if you're in the Southeast Texas area, or, within driving distance of Beaumont, Texas, you should look into Beast Feast. It's a really cool event. There's good food. There's all kind of giveaways. A lot of outdoor stuff. Jace Robertson is speaking. There's going to be music. I'm part of the band. It's a really cool event. I'd encourage anyone to come. There are tickets on sale. It's at Ford Park in Beaumont, Texas. It's inside this year, so we don't have what happened last year where the weather decides I'm gonna blow rain sideways underneath the pavilion for the outdoor venue. That was fun though. It was a memorable event. Still a really good time. It was crazy because it was sunny when we got there. That being said, I will get on for round one next Thursday, and then I'll probably stream rounds 2 and 3 on Friday, and then we'll see about Saturday. But I will be doing my own kind of draft show for definitely day 2, maybe day 3. Day 3 just goes on for a while, and I might have some other stuff going on because that's like a Saturday afternoon. So we'll see. But with that being said, that's the show for tonight. I know I kind of talking about future stuff fairly regularly, but I'm going to be pushing Beast Feast for like the next week. Get your ticket. It's like if you're interested and you're in the area, get your tickets now. It's going to be fun. It's going to be worth it to come. So with that being said, this has been BlindEyeLive. I will catch y'all tomorrow evening. I'm going to say around 9 o'clock again. Well, I shouldn't say that because it might be at 11. So for anyone who wants to watch live, and for those of you who are watching after the fact and are watching, like, say the next day, thank you so much. There will be a show out, or one of these shows recorded and out by Thursday